Hello and welcome back to Connected with Eva. We often think of heritage as something fixed stones, ruins, monuments. But what if heritage is actually about connection? Connection to place, to people, to identity, and to stories that shape who we are today. Today, I'm joined by Juliana van den Boogaard, an artist working at the intersection of art and cultural heritage. Through painting, storytelling, and long-term immersion projects, she explores how curiosity can turn into care and how reconnecting with heritage can restore a sense of belonging in a world that often feels rootless. Tell us about the moment when you felt inspired to embark on this journey.
This is a big question. There's different answers for it. I'm more about structure, okay, and heritage. So through man-made things. So it could be bridges, it could be old ships, it could be buildings. And I never really understood this, but when I was at school, when I was young, I was always, I think it's a bit of an obvious one. I'm an artistic brain, so I quickly got distracted. I was one of those students that stared out the window and looked at the buildings, or when I was frustrated or stressed, I'd always be drawing on a book, a structural thing, and it gave me a sort of a peace of mind, a bit of a meditative state. I'm curious. I traveled. I had amazing parents that gave us the luxury of visiting different places. And I quickly realized that when my friends would talk about oh God, this bad weather's really affecting me, I never really had that. I quite enjoy stormy weather because it's expression. And I never really got that. And I was always like, oh, this is strange. I don't have that. And I quickly came to realize that for me, structure and an environment I live in could really affect me. For example, let's use the extremes, right? You're in New York, you've got high, building scrapers. You're walking around and you feel so small. And feeling small didn't make me feel bad at all. But I quickly felt like, oh, I want to grow bigger. I'd go visit lots of friends at university, right? And some of them, if you go to Oxford, Cambridge, you go to Dublin, you go to Edinburgh, and you have different types of weather everywhere and quite stormy. And, Edinburgh has quite like a dark facade, stone-like. But entering those cold stone was something I was familiar with, growing up with a family that's in Alsace, where we were always around castle forts and that kind of thing, because you go for long walks and you visit them. And I was like, gosh, this was handmade. People took the time to build this column and look at all the details. When I was in environments where the structure took the time, and quite classical structure, actually, I really felt like I was always ready to work, sit down, focus, because I was amongst beauty where it took time. And so I had to feel worthy enough to work hard and do well, The point is, it became an obsession and it became a must. It helped me be creative, push further. It feels like when you're in an exciting structure or a building, it's like, okay, I'm worth being here. Now I need to up my game. It was like a bit of a motivational thing. And then, of course, the history behind it, the artists that work in it, those are all things that generated curiosity, and I really delved into it. And so in the end, with my art, my real purpose is to generate the curiosity to the audience, to the public, that I naturally live and breathe every day. Sometimes I walk around in the street, especially in a city I don't know, and I will literally walk and hit myself against a pole or bump into people on the street because I can't focus on walking and at the same time admiring everything that's around me. Actually, my husband gets quite frustrated with that. So I put my hand in his pocket and I follow him, which is a bit of a weird thing. Curiosity creates connection. It brings people together. It creates alliances. It makes preservation feel urgent. And it's not just history, but it's something living and that we're responsible for.
Why do you think curiosity is so powerful when it comes to heritage?
Curiosity is so powerful for all humans. It's what makes us here on Earth. If we weren't working anymore, if we weren't learning anymore, what's our purpose of being here? And I think that today, everything's given so quickly. You go visit something, you've already seen it online. You've got to make more of an effort to delve into it.
You need something not to be abstract to care about it. Right? So when you're curious and you explore and you become acquainted with it, you care, so you're willing to protect it. You feel connected.
I guess curiosity, it's my tool. I'll make a building, right? I'll paint a building, I'll tell a story, and then people will be like, oh gosh, I didn't know that about this building, and I walk past it every day. I don't know what it is for you, but I know for me, when I become curious about something, I start caring. And then when I care about something, I want to protect it. That's the like natural human ecosystem, I guess, right? And so if I start generating curiosity in the way I produce my paintings or the way I'm on site when I'm walking around, I'm interviewing or talking to the artisans, then people take the time to listen. And then if they take time to listen, even if they're from a distance, they want to be part of it and they want to protect it, right? So Notre Dame is the perfect example, I think. People need to realize the work that goes behind it, the savoir-faire, the knowledge that they have. We need to keep those hidden hands alive for people to understand that if we don't appreciate them, if we don't put funds into cultural heritage, it's going to die, right? And when Notre Dame burned down, people realized publicly the importance of like, okay, the woodworker, the mason, the knowledge. People were putting funds in it. I mean, it was huge. And I think from then onwards, on a wider spectrum, people then realize, okay, we need to keep our heritage alive, right? I find that we live in society today where people are scared of losing their identity, their roots, or they don't really know the meaning of it for different reasons, right? We live in quite a scary, shaky world where a lot of people are fearful or closed. And so often when a country is in crisis, actually the first cut fund that we have is in cultural heritage, which is so bad for me on a personal level, because what does heritage do? It's our identity. So why would you cut back on the first thing, which is our identity, where the first thing is you want to protect our identity? And so if we're living through a crisis of belonging, right, heritage helps people feel rooted because identity is layered, it's evolving, and it shapes our exchanges and everything. So you should bring people closer to it during crisis, right? To feel protected, care, and who we are.
I also think it's because we're disconnected from our roots and we're quite individualistic, which is not how we're supposed to be as human beings. And all these things with the modernization of, the world makes it very difficult to feel like you belong to something meaningful. So that's why there's a lot of loss of purpose.
Why do you think that, out of interest?
First of all, there's the thing that we're not really members of communities anymore. And communities are so important to us. We're beings that are supposed to be in a community. We thrive in communities. In Western societies now, that's not so promoted and easy to even create sometimes because, people are busy and working and doing things and getting distracted. I feel like community is one of the reasons for sure, because we're creatures that live best, flourish best in communities.
It's funny that you say that because I agree with you totally. That's why I'm asking you the question, to go a bit deeper into it. There is a lack of sense of community. Whether people realize it or don't, I also understand if they don't, because you're constantly in connection with the technology that we have today. I've really felt a sense of community in my work, in my art, actually. And two things. One, there's a project I've just started. It's a lifelong project. It's called Sur les traces des châteaux forts d'Alsace, where there's over 250 castle forts in Alsace, right? Which is the region in France where I come from. It's funny. I've been walking around those grounds since I'm a little girl, and it always felt a bit cold and lost in history because it's stone, and I just see it change over time because of the seasons, right? And then I didn't really pay so much attention because some look, some similar, some don't, and so on. And then over time, you see the structure that has changed. A wall has come up or a wall has come down. When I started this project, which was last winter, January 2025, I ended up going to a few of those castles and meeting the associations restoring those monuments. And they all work so differently, right? Some will have easier access. They'll have like a little house built next door where they have all their tools and their sheds, or they'll have like 30 people working on site. Some will have like 5 and it's really hard to access and it's complicated, but they're there. To say is I got to meet so many of them, speak to so many different masons. The sense of community that I got around it. First of all, the people that work there are all the local villagers, right? And a lot of them are retired people. And they come together and they're trained. Their work to look after the place in different way, whether it's the woodwork, the structure to keep the stone up, or working with the architects and understanding, and it's bring them together. And it's funny because a lot of people, they talk about feeling lonely once they retire or they're a bit too old and their families are abroad working, and the community that's built around, not just between themselves, right? Because you can have a community with the yoga class or, a book club. But this is a community where they are actively having an impact over keeping their heritage alive, their history alive, where they're on site and they feel like I've left something in this world to keep it alive that's part of our history, physically, manual. And there's something about working physically and manually when you're next to people and working as a team than just being behind your desk or office or computer, where it brings you back to humanity, using your hands, learning. You're still learning at the age of 75, 80, where it's like, oh, wow. So you're generating curiosity. You're learning from other people from all walks of life. There'll be like the local policeman or fireman working together and bringing back, there's this French expression, l'église au milieu du village, and it's bringing back to the people from the senses, the importance of, it doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, we're all here for the exact same reason. And it's to bring our heritage alive, to keep it going, to work together, to learn from each other, and to create a community where at the end of the day, you're actually physically tired because you walked up or you're carrying stones or you're doing this, and you go home and you're satisfied and you're like, oh, it's that good exhaustion of like, I've really done something today. And to have that in your community, I mean, some of the people, it's been so emotional that I've met. I've learned so much. I feel a bit like a journalist, right? I'm there to record what they're doing. Sometimes I painted like a mason and I'm like, what got you into this? And there's so much so deep ingrained behind it. And I'm not going to tell you all their stories, but, one of them said it was a poem when I was at school in the village about a mason. And he told me about it and he wrote it at the back of my painting and signed it. And it's something so personal about it. That's what I want to reach. There's so many people behind it that try and have their main à l'édifice. They want to be part of something big, and we don't realize because we don't see the work that goes behind it. And my duty is to record those communities that, thanks to them, they're the true artists keeping our heritage alive. And we need to be grateful and we need to understand. And hopefully I'm helpful that I could generate curiosity and interest where people be like, oh my God, I would like to work on my local community and help preserve our heritage. Another project I did, which was in classic sailing boats, right? I went to go live in a shipyard at the end of the Tiber River, right? In a place between Fiumicino and Ostia, not far from Rome, where I lived for 6 months on ships, old 1930s ships, amongst Italians that didn't speak a word of English, some of them. And I'd arrive on site and I wanted to paint their story, right? And the hard work they did behind it, they didn't really understand what I was doing on site at first. They were a bit like, okay, what's this artist? This girl doing there amongst this, it was quite a man's world, right? And it was cold and it was winter. Little by little, I'd be like, oh, what are you doing? And they're like, okay, she's bothering us. We're here to work. And then when they realized that I was there to really put to paper all the work they're doing, they were really like, oh my God, get involved. So they actually made me help them sand the woods. We're talking about also like 200-year-old keels of ships. And we're talking about some of the biggest architects of our time, nautical architects. And so I was there working, I got to get the physical part. So I was more sensibilized to the importance, the hard work behind it, being so careful and being so meticulous about how you're going to sand the wood. And then I used some of the wood that was left over, the metal that came off that were like so old that I would then put on my painting. And the idea is my painting would rot over time. If you don't look after, you don't preserve the work's going to change over time. And that's explains and makes a huge comment of our heritage, right? If you don't look after those buildings, those structure, they're going to rot over time. So it's really important to conserve it well. And then there was one of these old ships that went back into the water that was worked on for 5 years, right? And I'd been there for 6 months. The ship goes back into the water. There were 2 men who were in their 50s, hard workers, that started to cry. And just to see that, and it was the emotional of like, my God, like, it's so beautiful, all the work that we did. It was such on a personal level. I was like, people don't realize the emotion that goes behind it and the hard work. And I was touched by it. I was like, oh my God, like it's not just I'm here to work 9 to 5. It's I put my endless time and effort physically, mentally to make it perfect, because this is a boat that basically raced in the 1920s Olympics. It's heartwarming. It's amazing. They're the true artists of our time. And I'm just there, and I'm so lucky to be able to be part of projects where I could just assist and be part of it, thanks to them, to help tell the story, basically.
You're talking about artistry, crafts, and how it creates purpose to actually work with your hands. I'm thinking about, my grandmother, my great-grandmother's time in Bulgaria, for example, where people worked on the land. And these kind of things created such a purpose for them because of the information that's ingrained in our brains, that when we do things with our hands, we're who we are almost like born to be. The way we live nowadays makes it so difficult to be like that. So, when you're doing crafts and you're creating things, you're going back to that root.
So I was a bit at the beginning like, oh my God, with AI, if everything's going to be done, what are we going to be here for? I also had the fear, because we're always a bit fearful of the unknown, right? What are we going to become? The jobs of tomorrow are the plumbers, the woodworkers, the builders. And I'm like, yes, my goodness, it's about time. Of course, the information we want to read up about the history, everything will be there, but it means that we will be forced to go back into making things. The idea is you're not going to be able to have a machine or a robot, putting stone on castles, for example, or these bridges. Of course, you could use machine to help you, but we need to get back into us humans, the physical aspect, emotional, right? Relationships are important. You can be encircled with technology, right? Like COVID, everyone's like, oh, well, thank God we've got technology because we can film during those things. And actually, no, you've got to hug physically. You've got to touch. And it's the same with building, making, and we're going to go back to our roots, understanding, today, sometimes some light bulb's going to pop and someone's going to call someone to be like, could you help me change the light bulb? I don't know how to do it anymore. That's chaos, So my husband's in forestry and he's very much with nature and understanding, and I'm learning so much about it. Actually, what we did a couple of years ago is to go to Alaska, be dropped off by plane in the middle of nowhere, and you have to survive for a couple of days and walk through nature, right? And it was the first time I was amongst a grizzly bear. And before I saw the grizzly bear, I could smell the grizzly bear. And my intuition, I didn't know what grizzly bear smelled like, which is basically, FYI, it smells of like a moldy towel, right? But my intuition told me, okay, this is like a predator's around us. And then my husband was like, okay, well, by the way, they're bears, etc., and you want to be super careful and whatnot. Suddenly it's like, oh my God, I am nothing. I'm like an ant compared to nature. Well, I've always been very like making my own fires, doing my own things, but like I can't necessarily cook next to my tent, and I've got to be a couple of meters away, and I've got to eat quickly because if the bears smell it, you attract them, and all these things was like, it's hard to find that nature that some of these parts of the world, maybe no human has walked it. There is no path to find. You've got to make your own path. You've got to like cut through. And I was like, gosh, it's hard to find that. Like now luxury, it's not going to like some 5-star hotel in the Seychelles and like, okay, great for some people, but like luxury is finding the core untouched nature. Luxury is going to be using your hands to build, which sounds very weird. And I hope we could talk about it in 10 years, which is quite short, believe it or not, because things are moving so fast where people be like, oh my God, that sculpture, and he built this. And I like to go back into the buildings where we're like creating these amazing wooden sculptures that is a fresque on the wall. Let's go back to that. And the beauty of the imperfections, right? Because of course now you have these laser machines that could like make that beautiful fresque. You have perfection through photography, through everything. So there's beauty in the man-made. And we're going back to that. I can reassure you that.
I like that. Also, it's a really nice and optimistic and positive way to look at the future. Because I feel like there's sometimes at the moment, specifically, like you said, with AI, a lot of confusion, fear, So I love that. It will be doing things, also meeting people in person, whether it's for in-person events or all that. It might bring us back to communities, you know?
I think it already has. The moments where I've been very scared about tech and everything. It's literally like articles, scary, the world's ending, this is happening. And I was like, okay, whether I like it or not, the world is changing at a pace that's too fast for me to download and digest. So I either accept it or I don't. And to accept things, right, like anything, you're better at accepting it in a positive level faster to help you. Otherwise, you're stagnant. You're in stagnant water. If you're literally going around the negatives, you're not going to find a loophole. So we're in like fast waters. You better go with the current. And to go with the current for it to be livable, so you're not sinking, you better look at the positives. So you're like, okay, I'm swimming through this. So when I started looking at positive articles through things that I like, suddenly I'm like, oh, wow, okay, I see the goodness in it. And of course, there'll be things that I don't like, but I start having conversation with people. I'm like, okay, this is positive. This is where we're at. Some people are like, oh, heritage is dying and people don't care about it. And I'm like, well, no, actually, people care about it because of this and this. And that's what I looked into. Or, some people, it's too nostalgic. I'm like, are you crazy? Heritage is all about monuments reliving. As an example, Hagia Sophia, right? Which was a mosque, then a museum, then a mosque. The fact is, it's constantly moving, it's changing. I'll say something personal. My family home, which is on an old heritage site, was a Roman village, Then it was a monastery. Then there was a huge massacre. Then in the First World War, it was where pregnant women were giving birth. Then in the Second World War, there were Alsatian soldiers and Jews hiding in the castle walls. Then it was a family place. There was so much history. You could either look at it as a nostalgic thing, whereas actually I'm like, it's constantly moving. I mean, the fact that we could keep it in the family, it's absolutely amazing. But maybe one day we won't be able to, and maybe one day it will be a site for visitors. It will probably be maybe be a museum, or maybe it will be an experience where people could come, a bit like a hotel or Airbnb experience. Or there's so much, and it's constantly moving with time, with society. It's not nostalgic at all. It's actually fascinating because, they're standing still. They look the same. They're old stone. They're all walls, but they're constantly moving. That actually, the fact that it could adapt to our society, it's fascinating. Fascinating. And it's not nostalgic. And I'm curious. It's like, what is it going to be in 10 years? It's scary, right? But at the same time, it's like, wow, I can't wait to know what it could be in 10 years. And sometimes when it's difficult times, so I could imagine people during the war when it was bombed and the structure collapsed, they're like, it's the end of it. Oh, what is our family going to be? It's actually the fact that the hardest part means you're at the lowest point, you can only go up. And what happens when you go up, that growth is where it becomes stronger again. And that's the beauty of it. So the moments where that's the lowest, and that's also with society, I'm like, okay, wow, this is a low point. There's a moment it's going to go higher and we're going to learn from it. And that's going to be the most powerful moment where the pride and keeping it together and building and putting the stone on top of one another, rebuilding is what creates like, wow, this is who we are. This is where we come from. That's the beauty of it.
It's like an immersive history book. So, you're walking there, you're opening the book, and then all of the history is coming at you, and you feel so connected to it because you can see it on the stone, oh, that was from that time. And it makes it feel so personal as well. You can touch it. So you can touch history, which is so beautiful.
Actually, I'll tell you a story. Exchanges. People exchange have an influence on your life, right? I had this history of art teacher at school who was just amazing. She changed my life. That's why I really believe in education and teachers. Teachers have the best job and it's undervalued and they have the biggest influence on children, right? We don't realize that. And my teacher, we had the chance of going to Florence and visit amazing places and museums. And I noticed, and she also shared with me, that when she arrived in a museum, she would pull out a flock of hair and drop it in the museum or on a site we would be. And I'd be like, why are you doing this? And she's like, okay, Juliana, the thing is, I'm on historical grounds that are so amazing to know that a part of me is on soil or structure that breathes history and have so much importance gives me comfort. And I was like, that's such a weird thing, but it stuck with me because when I'm on site, especially on restoration sites where things are changing, that's the most exciting time. I'm like, historically, this is vital. It's so important. I sort of walk around at first and I try and like get a feel of the site. I touch the stone and I'm like, how many other people have touched the stone? And sometimes I'll try and find stones that are really in like nooks of a place and I'll touch it and I'll be like, that's crazy. Like this is something that has been there. It's probably the lowest stone and has not moved. And for me, it's like, okay, I went there and I touched it. There's a feel for it. I also have a sensitivity towards the materials, the grain of the stone, the soil of the place that was there, but the smell, the cold, there's so many senses. And I sit there in silence for quite some time. And sometimes I find myself pulling a piece of my hair and leaving it there. And I know it's going to go with the wind and it doesn't matter, but it's like a part of me I'm leaving behind. And it's a bit of a like, my sign of respect of like, I want a part of me being there because it's so beautiful and worth. And I'm like, I left a piece of me, and I understand this identity and understanding. Could you imagine what the craftsman must feel? And I'm talking about even people restoring, Rembrandt paintings, where they're cleaning the painting and they're adding the pigments and all these things with the night watch, that painting. And they leave and they come and they see millions of people every year come and look at those paintings, look at the restored place, reopen, the people that worked with Notre Dame, everything. They see all these people emotionally being there like, oh, wow. They're like, I physically helped doing that. It doesn't matter. You don't need a medal. It's just like, God, I really added value on this world.
Talking about Notre Dame, I really like the story of one of the people working on it, getting married there afterwards. It was almost as a way to thank him and to appreciate the craftsmanship, but also it was collective thank you for everyone who worked on it. And it was so beautiful.
It's so beautiful. And that also creates a community. For me, the sense of community was really vital in my work. A lot of people are like, you're doing too much, Juliana. You should either just paint or you should go interview people. I've always done lots of things, even exhibitions. I did my own exhibitions. I invited the mason, the artisan. Everyone's like, why are you trying to be jack of all trades? It's like, I'm not trying to be jack of all trades. I'm only a piece of the puzzle. For my work to look complete, I need to have everyone around. For example, an exhibition I'm dying to put out in a couple of years would be on the castle forts of Alsace, right? Of the communities that I met. And in an ideal world, and I will end up doing it because I'm determined, is to do an exhibition where maybe you'll have the president of the patrimoine that's there who's talking about the importance of heritage on the organization point of view level. Then I would like to maybe have a mason that's there with his stone, showing people what it's like to carve a stone. So it would be like a experience exhibition. Then I like to have maybe more on a digital front. Sometimes you've got to digitalize what parts you're going to have to restore and do. He'd be there with a computer showing the importance of the digital aspect. Then me as an artist, I'll have paintings, which are, imagine, photographs of the places before, during, after, in an artistic point of view, because I feel like it has a different kind of value than just a photograph where you have the piece of the stone on a canvas and then there'll be a video and then you'll have so many different things, so many different senses because people have different interests, right? And the point is, the more we're together, the stronger we become and the more our statement of storytelling of those historical places come alive. Because some people feel like, oh, it's this old place, No, they're alive, they're breathing, they're moving cells. The people that work behind it, there are so many people. They're those telling the stories, they're the journalists. We belong together. They're not different sectors. So if I can be the magnet, because my job is to meet all these kind of people, to bring them together under the same roof, to have exchanges, not to just tell the story, but to learn from one another. I learn so much. I'm like a sponge absorbing information on site. It's continuously moving. You can't just like, okay, now I know the history of the place. I know everything. Like, no, there's so much. There's different technologies. There are things that are evolving. And so the community has to stick together. And I will be that glue. And I want to be that glue. And it's my duty. And, maybe I do it in painting, but maybe there might be a different medium that I use later that helps me be more expressive. Maybe sometimes I can't paint because I feel frustrated. I'm like, God, like, am I really bringing enough to society? Because sometimes I'm like, are people interested enough in my paintings? I feel like I could do more. Like it's never enough. And thank you for that. Thank God, because if it's enough and I'm like satisfied, will I keep moving as much, as fast and as passionately? I don't know. Some people are like, when is my goal? When will I be satisfied? I don't think I'll ever be satisfied. You can continuously grow. You can continuously pass a message on. And so my idea is once we build this community and this exhibition, even with the paintings, some of the artisans will have that added value in the work because they'll sign something at the back. It'll be personal. There'll be a letter behind it or something about why they're part of it. And then the idea is a percentage of those paintings will not go towards a gallerist. Let's say one of the castle forts was not able to build their north wall because it's too expensive and actually their organization is less structured than others. Okay, all those paintings, that whole series will go to rebuild that north wall of that castle. And so I'm someone that doesn't know much about the site. I love art. I buy this painting and I know when I look at it every day that I added value and I helped because a percentage of the sale of that painting went towards restoring that wall. And guess what? I met the mason that worked on it because they were part of that. And I know there's an amazing president of that organization because he gave an amazing speech and all his values and the core behind the project are so aligned with, yes, he put words into something I didn't know about because I'm too busy in the city and I'm not sensitive towards that because I don't see it every day. But I understand it because I was shown it on a physical, on a technical level, on so many different mediums. And I believe in that project. Because why? It's part of our identity. It's part of our history. I feel like I belong and I've given an added value into something that is part of my history.
If anything, I think it flows very nicely to my next question. If someone feels disconnected from place, from history or community or themselves, what step would you invite them to take?
Ooh, that's an interesting one. There are so many steps. I also, by the way, feel disconnected at times. Some people are like, oh, the world we live in, we're so disconnected. No, I think everyone has always felt disconnected. When you feel disconnected, it helps you to push further, to reconnect, right? So you keep evolving. Some people that, I don't know, never use technology or their phones. They're like meditating every day and they eat healthy and they live the perfect life. I am sure they at times feel disconnected. It's part of growth. So we should never be afraid of it. For me, so I'm going to talk to you about a personal level. It's everything. If I feel disconnected, I need to physically disconnect from the world. I need nature. I go for walks. I do sports, but not just for like an hour. Like I would literally take a weekend where like I switch off. Sometimes to feel connected, I need to paint because my words don't come out. Nothing to do with my projects, anything, my emotions to get them out. Or I need to sing in the shower because I'm a terrible singer and I don't want anyone to hear, but it's my way to evacuate and to feel connected, right? Or I need to go smell some flowers or nature, or I need to taste something really good. Oh God, that meal reminds me of when I was a child. It's my mom's favorite cake or whatever. Chocolate cake, by the way, amazing. But what I mean is you need to reconnect. What are the 5 senses? Touch, feel, smell, see. That's how one reconnects because that's part of the human body, right? So it depends on everyone. If someone is always on their own, meditating and in nature, maybe their way of reconnecting is to go in a city and see friends. But I think all senses and ways of expressions are vital. And actually in my classes in education, so I teach adults, I teach children. And of course, sometimes I could teach the technical way, how to draw, etc. But what I teach actually is past artists. So like Kandinsky, Picasso, I give them a bit of history and then I get them to explore in their own way that way of painting, right? Because a lot of people are always like, oh, I can't draw. Everyone could pick up a pen and draw. Everyone can paint. It's like, oh, yeah, you can't say I'm not sporty. Everyone's got to exercise a bit because it's for the mental health. And the same as painting. And we grew up, well, I certainly grew up where like you look at the other person's paper and you're like, oh, you didn't draw that giraffe very well. Everyone's like, I can't draw because you're comparing yourself. Where actually, yes, you can. You just maybe have a different way. And so one of the first classes I always do actually is Kandinsky, right? Kandinsky had this illness where his senses were mixed. So when he heard music, he saw colors. And when he saw colors, he heard music. That's why his works are so abstract and crazy and colorful, but he would listen to music and you could see in his paintings different feelings evolving, right? And so I put the same music that Kandinsky listened, and then I say to them, do it your own way, your own music. So it's not about how am I drawing, but it's more about using color and music. So different senses and feeling and painting and putting it on the canvas. So immediately puts people out of like what an artist's feeling is meant to be and to explore. And then they have to present and tell the class, okay, I actually use those colors because actually that music made me feel a bit sad, or that music actually made me feel very summery and it reminded me of this memory. And they start expressing art, like singing, like sport, like eating, like breathing, like seeing is a must. Everyone, it's a way of expression, should be doing it as an exercise. So actually to those, that's my advice, that don't paint, a banker, right, that wouldn't necessarily in his free time paint. I'd be like, you should paint. You should do this exercise because you actually reconnect when you're doing something that you're so disconnected from. That's how you reconnect.
It's funny because my art teacher, when I was 14, he was always telling us, you're stupid because you can't draw. Talking about the importance of teachers, right?
I often got cross with some teachers that I felt really made me feel so small. They said things that really affected me without them realizing. And actually, I had to take a step back. One thing is, when you're annoyed or angry at someone, you've always got to forgive. And actually, what I think, they're only repeating something that they learnt and they don't know better. And if only they knew. So either I let them know or I just let it go. And it's all things. It's like in the road, right? You'll get some people, they're like rushing behind you, like, get out the way, get out the way. And you can either get annoyed and, chase them, not that I would ever. Or you could be like, I like to imagine when I'm annoyed and I've got someone stressed behind me, I just think, imagine he's probably got his wife who's pregnant, who's next to him in the car, and she's about to give birth. So he has to rush to hospital. So I need to help him. So I'm going to get out of the way. And it changed my way. Instead of arriving in an office, being grumpy, like someone stressed me on the road, I'd be like, I helped someone today, which is probably a total lie. Or this person, I'm like, okay, they're annoyed and it's just, it belongs to them and it doesn't belong to me. That's kind of my way of going through life in general, right? Not everyone's going to understand what you're trying to say or do, but the only thing you can control is where you're at. So it's the same thing as like going back to artisans, because I'm really passionate about that. Some artisans have probably worked their whole life on something and they'll probably be like, no one will ever know that I did it, but it doesn't matter because I know I did. And on my deathbed, I'd be like, I really, really made a difference and I did something that was added value, and that's sufficient.
I'd love to end the episode with a quote from you because you have such beautiful quotes. I'll say my quote that's favorite from you. Curiosity creates importance.
I would actually go as to say stronger, curiosity is the engine. And so if there's no curiosity anymore in humanity and the engine's not running, what happens is it rusts and it becomes dead and it breaks down. So you need to have constant curiosity to get the engine going. And that's in everything. To ask questions to people, right? Because if you know everything of everything, which is practically impossible, it's stagnant. You've got no more questions. Someone actually said to me the other day, we were talking about intelligence, right? We came out of a dinner and there was someone that was very bright, according to them, and someone that was not so bright. We were in the car and I said, okay, what makes you think that this person is bright and this person is not so bright? Could you elaborate? And he said, well, he was there running the conversation. We were talking about history and he gave all those dates. He had all this knowledge and everything. He was super intelligent. And I was like, okay. And then what about the other person? So, well, that other person just like not very intellectually driven, a bit stupid, didn't have much to say. And I was like, okay, who was asking all those questions and not afraid to being stupid? Because clearly you noticed that he was, in your words, stupid. It's like, oh, it was that person. And I was like, okay, so you think that that person that clearly did all the books, all the quotes, everything right, that got all the good grades at school, that's sitting there at dinner, literally telling you all the information. But then when you were going against his words, he'd be like, no, that's wrong. And then the conversation stopped. Or that person that didn't know much, that was actually not afraid of being stupid because no question is a stupid question, that left that dinner having learned something, that bounced off questions, that actually put into question that intelligent person, inverted commas, at the dinner, that actually suddenly stopped the conversation because realized that he didn't know in depth that other things, so decided not to speak. Who's the bright one there? Is that person that leaves dinner that's constantly learning and evolving as a human being. Who's the bright one there? And that's someone, again, curious. Some of the brightest people are the ones, that might also know all the data and everything, but that will keep asking questions, even to those that don't know. And actually, the ones that don't know about something sometimes ask the questions because they've got fresh eyes that never knew. And so you learn and you evolve more. It's like, you get the type of parenting. I don't know about you, but like I had grandparents who were like, oh, you can't really talk at the table or give your opinion until a certain age because the adults are talking, right? And then you get the ones where you're too young, you're talking nonsense, you don't know what you're talking about. Actually, the truth comes from children. They're the bright ones. They come with fresh eyes on this planet. They ask the right questions, some questions that would be like, oh my God, I never thought about that. So you should never undervalue or undermine children because they have those fresh questions, those fresh eyes. But suddenly you'd be like, oh my goodness, push further. And it's our duty to ask questions, right? And to continue to be curious, not to diminish them and say, go to school, go learn more, and then come back and then recite to me everything, because then I know I was worth paying your school fees, right? Terrible. I've got a couple of things I'm just going to say out loud. And because we're talking a lot about curiosity, that's why I'm delving more into curiosity, but there's actually so much more. Curiosity is the beginning of protection. So when people become curious, they start to care. And when they care, they protect. It's vital, and it's really putting into word the evolvement of why you protect those places. Heritage is one of those few things that can bring different generations into the same conversation, but it's always an evolving conversation. So we're going back in time, but it's also evolved, and it's different, but it's also the same because you're going back to the core, the forefront, the story, the beginning. To know where we stand, it helps to know where we're standing.
I love that.
Protecting heritage isn't nostalgia, it's protecting meaning, skill, and human scale. Tech can open the door, but the real transformation happens in front of the stone, the texture, the silence. I love that one because you're talking about different senses in one sentence. I want to make the invisible hands visible. And it's hard. Very often I'm very unsatisfied with my paintings. I was like, is it enough? Is it enough? It's not enough. I feel like I need to incorporate video, speech, feel, everything for it to come one, because it has to reach everyone, but you can't do that. Not in one piece. And it's funny because I use my hands for my work and it's so visible. And I still feel like my hand is still too visible over their invisible hands because people are like, oh, it's the artist. What did she use? It's like, wait. It's not what I used. I'm using that as a way of luring you into the story to see the other hands. Another quote I've got is when people feel disconnected, they can become fearful, and heritage can be an anchor, a way back to meaning. Heritage reminds us that identity isn't fixed. It's layered, evolving, and shaped over time. Heritage isn't frozen in stone. It's held by people. If we reach people through feeling, then we reach them for longer. And then that's when curiosity is the beginning of protection, right?